Yoshida was a broke, miserable loser that got brutally rejected by his crush and became depressed, but everything changed after he decided to take in a homeless girl that kept trying to clap him as payment. It all started on the night Yoshida finally got to take Goto out on a date. After spending a whole night staring at her melons, he finally found the courage to ask if she wanted to spend the night at his place. She turned him down after using him for free food and said she already had a boyfriend that was waiting to pound her guts. Later that night, he was at a bar with Hashimoto, drowning himself in beer and pissing everyone off with his yelling. Just before midnight, Hashimoto got tired of trying to help him and said he was going home to be with his wife. On his way home, Yoshida saw a pair of yum rice cakes and scoped the scene to make sure he wasn't being filmed by one of those PDF catchers before going to ask Sayu why she was outside so late. After she told him the train stations were closed, he asked if she had somewhere to stay, and she got up to say she would stay with him. He was trying to joke about her having to pay if he would even allow it, but then she offered to let him hit in exchange. His dingleberries immediately started tingling, but he asked again to see if she was joking, and she actually meant it. He refused to smash, claiming he was a man of dignity, but several minutes later, he took her back to his place and told her to get comfortable before falling into bed. She climbed onto the bed to offer her melons as payment again, but he still declined the offer and started talking about miso soup before passing out. When he woke up the next morning, he saw her cooking and started freaking out as he couldn't remember what happened. After she told him, he asked if they had done anything together and started sweating in fear, so she told him to chill out and showed him the miso soup she was making. After serving it to him, he told her to leave, so she started telling him everything that happened, and he finally remembered seeing her rice cakes under the lamppost. He had just taken a sip of the soup when she started asking about Goto and left him shocked before explaining that he had been mumbling about her in his sleep. She then went over to offer her melons again, but he still refused to touch them, so she took off her jacket and asked if they were too small for him. He said they were not as big as Goto's.
What do you mean by that?
So they started comparing cup sizes until he realized that they were actually almost the same size. When she told him to try sticking it in, he asked her why she was trying so hard to get clapped by him and said he could have done it by force if he wasn't a decent guy, but she said she didn't care either way. When he got pissed at her nonchalant attitude, she grabbed him and asked why he was trying so hard to control himself while pressing her melons into his chest. He then pushed her back and started asking about where she came from, so she gave him her ID, and he realized that she had skipped town. He asked her about it, so she explained that she had dropped out of school and ran away from home 6 months ago. When he asked about her parents, she said they were probably better off without her, and that struck a chord. He then asked her how she was planning to survive on her own, and she said she would keep looking for a guy that would let her stay in exchange for her plot. When he realized that she was slowly becoming a hoe, he told her to get an actual job, but she said it wouldn't be enough for her to get a place. He decided to let her stay and said she would work for him as his maid, but it would be until she could go back to her parents. He also threatened to toss her back to the curb if she ever tried to show him her melons again, and she agreed. At work the next week, Hashimoto told him he could get arrested and charged as a PDF, but he still decided to keep on playing pretend daddy. On the way home that night, he remembered Hashimoto telling him not to get attached, but he also thought about what Sayu said about her parents and felt he was doing the right thing. When he got home, she welcomed him at the door and said she had made soup again, but he bought food on the way back, so they ate that instead. After eating, he took the ashtray and was stepping out for a smoke when she said the other guys she stayed with didn't care about smoking around her. Hearing that pissed him off, so he told her to stop having shitty standards and letting guys treat her like a bop, even if she technically was one. After his alarm went off that weekend, she got up to do the laundry, and he noticed that her back was aching from sleeping on the floor. He was trying to read the news later on when she gave him a peek at her nether region and said it was all she had to wear when he started asking about it. Later on, he took her to the mall to get clothes and a Fuden, but she didn't like having him buy all those things for her because she couldn't pay him back, so he told her the chores she had been doing were enough payment to make her feel better. At work the next week, Hashimoto told him the girls at work had started spreading rumors about him having a new girl because of how clean he always looked and promised to keep his PDF activity a secret so he wouldn't get locked up. The next morning, Sayu noticed that he paid little attention to his looks and told him it was probably why Goto rejected him. So he decided to skip breakfast to bust out the shaver. That weekend, he added skincare to the list of things he spends his paycheck on for Sayu, and on the escalator ride down, he saw a foam store and asked her if she needed one. After she told him how she had tossed her phone into the ocean before skipping town, he offered to get her a new one. but she refused to let him spend any more money and said she didn't need one. When they got back home, he gave her permission to read some of the manga he got for himself and was about to leave when he noticed her mood swing and asked if she was okay. She wanted to say something but hid it with a smile and said she was okay, but he knew something was up and kept asking. She started laughing and said it was just a lame joke. He knew she was faking her laughter, so he told her to stop feeling like she owed him something because she also helped him out in the house. He had just gotten to his bed when she came out and said she was actually trying to ask why he was being so nice to her. She said no one else had treated her like he did and sat beside him while saying she would try her best to stop faking the smiles. When he told her to take her time, she held his hand and started asking if there was any other way she could repay his kindness, but he pulled away and laughed it off before telling her to stick to being a dishwasher.
What do you mean by that?
At work the next evening, he called Mishima to tell her the code she was developing was buggy and said she would have to work late to fix it since they had a deadline to meet. When she finally finished it that night, he gave her some food he had bought and sat to eat with her. After thanking him for always looking out for her, she asked him why he paid extra attention to her, and he said it was because she didn't have enough brain capacity to do things on her own. She then told him she had noticed how he suddenly started paying attention to his looks and asked if he was seeing someone, so he told her about the heartbreaking rejection he got from Goto. Hearing that made her excited for some reason, so she finished up with the food and asked him for a beer date that he reluctantly agreed to. When he got home later on, he spent a few minutes apologizing to Sayu for coming back late until she decided to forgive him and went to keep the meal she made before getting him a beer. During their lunch break the next day, he took Hashimoto phone shopping and kept looking through different models until Hashimoto asked why he was taking so long to make a choice. After he explained that the model had to be just right for Sayu, Hashimoto told him to be careful about the attention he was giving her so he wouldn't end up falling for her. But Yoshida said it was impossible since he only liked older women with mummy milkers.
My man.
When they got back, he kept checking his watch, so Hashimoto told him to stop getting overexcited, and then Goto suddenly told him to see her after work. Before leaving, Hashimoto told him to work on his rise game before seeing her, but at the restaurant later that night, he could barely speak while she gulped down her glass of beer. She was trying to ask him why he was so chill with her drinking like an alcoholic, but all he could hear were her mega melons and lips. After she caught him staring, he started drinking his beer, but then she asked if he liked the view, and he almost choked on it. When he told her it was weird for her to ask him out after the rejection, she suggested asking each other questions to lighten the mood and let him go first. He asked her why she had asked him out in the first place, and she responded by asking if he was seeing someone. When he told her he was still single, she said he was lying and started asking about how close he was with Mishima, before saying she had also noticed how he suddenly started taking care of his appearance. After telling her there was nothing going on with Mishima, he said he only had eyes for her and still felt the same even if she had been his boss for the past 5 years. He then asked her why she even cared since she already rejected him, so she said she didn't like the idea of him suddenly falling for someone else after saying he loved her. After she apologized for the misunderstanding, he asked if that was the only reason why she wanted to see him, and she said it was, but also let him ask one more question. He then asked for the size of her melons.
What?
And her answer left him deep in thought throughout the train ride home. When he got back, Sayu noticed his mood and asked about it, but he tried to play it off until he saw that she wasn't going to leave without an answer and told her about the date. He was upset about not getting any action, so she gave him a hug to make him feel better and told him she had prepared the bath. After soaking for a while, he ate the soup she made him before giving her the phone and watching her get excited like a proud father. After having a dream about one of the guys she stayed with who used her to dump his man milk until she could barely move, Sayu woke up and started wondering why Yoshida wasn't like that. Before leaving for work the next day, he told her to fix her hair and left her even more confused about his intentions while doing the laundry. During lunch at work, he was talking to Mishima about a new project when Endu showed up to ask if he had actually turned down a work trip for once. When he confirmed the rumors, Endu asked if it was about Goto, but Yoshida was confused by the question. So Endu said he had definitely turned down the work trip because of a girl and started asking if he had a new girlfriend. Mishima also wanted to know who the new mystery girl was, but he told them there was no one, and they refused to believe him. So he said there was a package coming in for him around the time for the trip. Endu still didn't believe him, but decided to stop asking questions and left to finish what he was working on. After work that day, Mishima asked if they could go see a movie together, but before he could turn her down, she paid for the tickets and told him to meet her outside. So he got up to follow her and almost bumped into Goto on the way out. At the time, Sayu was trying to soak up his scent from the bed and got a text from him about the movie. By sundown, she was trying to start dinner, but she also couldn't shake her curiosity and decided to go find him. Meanwhile, he had just gotten out of the theater with Mishima and was talking to her about how the romance movie made him remember his love for fated relationships. Somewhere along the line of their discussion, she got serious and told him she had already found her fated relationship. So he told her to give it her all and suddenly grabbed him. After Sayu saw them together, she ran off, and when Mishima asked if he could feel her melons, he pushed her away. She hid her disappointment behind a smile and thanked him for seeing the movie with her before heading out. She then stopped to ask what he would do if she was his fated bride, but he told her to stop taking crack before also turning to leave. After getting home and realizing that Sayu wasn't there, he ran out and started freaking out. Meanwhile, she was at the park trying to talk herself out of feeling sad until her tears started pouring out. Moments later, Mishima found her and asked if she was okay before deciding to sit with her until the last train. When Mishima realized that Sayu was a runaway, she told her she had also left home a couple of times when she was in high school before asking about the kind of relationship she had with her parents. Sayu said she had an amazing relationship with them and loved how kind they were, but that was apparently not enough to keep her from running away. She then subtly told her about someone she was hiding her love from. So Mishima dedicated half an hour to teaching her about love and how she should tell the person how she felt, regardless of what might happen. After standing up to get her all hyped up to profess her love, Sayu got up and decided to head back home. But then Yoshida found them. He immediately called Sayu aside and demanded an explanation, but just as she was about to tell him what happened, Mishima asked if he was her father. After he said no, she asked why they were living together, but because she could sense the tension from her talk with Sayu, she told him to explain things later and wished them luck before leaving. When they got back home, Yoshida was trying to hang up his clothes when Sayu came to talk to him in nothing but her special garments. He told her to get dressed before trying to talk to him, but she refused and said he had to hear her out first. After getting close to him, she asked if he wanted to clap her, and he reminded her of his promise to kick her out for trying to do that again, but then she got emotional and grabbed him while talking about how all the other guys had no trouble doing it. She then pulled him in closer and asked if he really didn't want it before grabbing his sword to see if he actually didn't feel anything for her. After telling her that he also had the same average male response to seeing freshly waxed milk jugs, he pulled her hand away and told her to get back. She then told him that she had actually tried working for the guys she first stayed with, but due to the risk associated with keeping her around, she ended up having to pay them with her melons. She said that was what made her confused about him because he had let her stay with him for so long and only made her do the dishes in return. She got close again and begged him to do it because it would make her feel like she wasn't just being a freeloader, but he gave her a hug instead. He then held her back and started complimenting her looks before saying he didn't love her and was only going to do it with someone he loved. After making sure she understood what he meant, he made her get dressed, and moments later, he'd explained that she wasn't just a dishwasher to him. He told her his life had gotten a lot less depressing after she showed up and said she had slowly made him feel better about himself just by talking to him. After giving her a second to cry, he told her to keep helping him get back his confidence instead of trying to offer her melons, so she hugged him and promised to do just that. Several nights later, Sayu asked for his permission to get a job and was shocked when he easily let her get one. He said it would be good for her and told her to try making friends. At a convenience store the next day, Asami called her a baddie for dropping out of school to become a cashier, before showing her the ropes and telling her to stop with the excessive glazing. After closing up the store that evening, Asami realized that they actually lived close to each other and asked Sayu if she could come over. When she said Yoshida might not be okay with it, Asami asked if they were dating, but she said he was like a brother. Asami then said she had to come over to see what kind of brother he was. Later on, Yoshida got a text from her at the office saying she was already back home with Asami and was trying to reply to it when Mishima tried peeping and asked about Sayu. After Hashimoto asked him when he told her, Mishima realized that he also knew about Sayu and started arguing with Yoshida over not telling her sooner while Goto watched them from her table. When he got back later on, Sayu opened up, and Asami welcomed him with a quick roasting session before introducing herself and asking why he couldn't afford a bigger apartment. They spun a story about being childhood friends, so while Sayu was making dinner, he was making up childhood memories to keep the story legit, so Asami wouldn't call the cops on him. After Sayu served what would have been dinner for the both of them, Asami decided to join in and fell in love with her cooking. Shortly after that, Yoshida saw that Asami was getting too comfortable and straight up told her to get out, so she got up to leave and said he had to escort her because she was too hot to walk back alone. Sayu tried to go with them, but Asami stopped her, and after walking with Yoshida for a few minutes, she told him to stop lying about being Sayu's childhood friend. After considering his next moves carefully and deciding that murder was a bit too drastic for him, he told her they were simply living together and said he was too old to be making up stories. After Yoshida said he wanted Sayu to be the one to tell her the truth, Asami said he had passed the test and told him to stop following her because she didn't want him to see her place. He then told her to come over anytime so she could become good friends with Sayu, and she then told him that Sayu was really good at hiding her emotions before leaving. After finishing work the next night, he was trying to text Sayu when Goto suddenly showed up and asked for another date, just as Mishima was trying to get him some coffee. At the restaurant moments later, he got distracted by the text he was sending to Sayu and what Asami told him the other night until Goto brought his attention back. He tried asking her what she wanted with a serious look, but her melons deactivated his brain cells again. So she started talking about how she had recently noticed him always on the phone and asked if he was seeing someone. He then asked her why she was suddenly so interested in what he had going on, and said he would only give her an answer after she explained herself. After putting down the beer, she told him there was a reason why she paid a lot of attention to him, and squeezed her melons to increase her clap appeal before saying she actually liked him. At the time, Sayu had just finished dinner and got excited to text him, but then she saw his text about the date with Goto. Goto said she never actually had a boyfriend, and that came as a shock to Yoshida, so he asked her why she rejected him back then. She said it was because she could sense that something was up with him, and didn't think it would be a good time for the both of them to start seeing each other. But he was convinced that she was lying, and told her to stop playing games with him. When she said she would do anything to prove that she actually liked him, he asked if she would let him hit, and she suddenly went completely silent. He told her it was a joke, but then she said she was actually a virgin and left him shocked, so he apologized for being insensitive and asked if she was being serious. Goto said she never had the chance to visit Pound Town, and started getting nervous while talking about it, so he told her to chill out. He then said he was never going to ask her out again, and told her to be the one to make the move whenever she felt it was the right time, because she never liked to speak up. She saw that he was upset and asked him why, so he told her he didn't like how she had been taking him on an emotional roller coaster. After apologizing, she agreed to be the one to make the move, and told him to explain his recent addiction to texting. Back home, Sayu was trying to enjoy dinner on her own, but then she remembered something traumatic from her past and ran to puke. She then got a text from Yoshida that broke her heart, so she responded and dropped to rethink her life choices, but he texted back and explained that Goto actually wanted to see her so she wouldn't run away again. On the way to Yoshida's place, he gave Goto the same childhood friend story they spun for Asami, and when they eventually got there, she said hi to Sayu and offered some snacks. Moments later, she had busted him for lying about the childhood thing and said she was surprised that he had enough balls to comfortably keep Sayu around. Goto then asked Sayu if he had done anything with her, and she told her how surprised she still was by the fact that he refused to make a move. After he defended his dignity, they both noticed Sayu acting weird, but when Goto asked her about it, she said it was nothing. When she tried asking again and still got nothing, Yoshida started feeling the tension between them and left to use the men's room. Sayu started avoiding eye contact with Goto, so she asked if there was something she wanted to get off her chest and said it would be best if they spoke in private. When Yoshida came out of the restroom, Sayu told him she needed some groceries, but before leaving, he asked if she was okay being alone with Goto, and she said it was cool, so he left. Immediately, Sayu sat to face Goto. She started asking questions about how she ended up at his place, so Sayu told her the full story. Goto then asked her why she ran away, but she refused to answer that, so she switched to asking her when she planned to leave his place. At the time, Yoshida was on his way to the store and ran into Mishima, who said she had gone to see a movie at the theater. After he told her the theater was half an hour away from where they currently were, she said she had just decided to stroll close to his house and asked for where he was going. He told her about Sayu's request, and she started asking weird questions, like she didn't already know that they lived together before deciding to escort him to the grocery store. Back at his place, Sayu had refused to answer Goto's question, so she told her that she would always be seen as the high school girl she was even if she didn't like it or kept trying to run from it. She thought she had given Sayu a hard pill to swallow and wanted to give her time to talk. But then Sayu started thanking her for telling her the truth about her situation. She then started talking about all the guys she had stayed with and how she sometimes liked being clapped by them because it made her feel like she was worth something. After Sayu talked about how Yoshida was the only exception, Goto started laughing and told her she wasn't surprised, before saying she was happy Yoshida made her feel safe. She then said it was okay for her to accept his kindness and went over to tell how important it was for her to be careful with the way she treated his kindness so it wouldn't cause him to end up in trouble. Sayu said she still couldn't imagine going back to face her demons, but she knew it was wrong to keep staying with him, so she promised to eventually leave and face her past so Yoshida could also avoid becoming a Japanese R. Kelly. Goto then gave her a hug and told her to take her time in dealing with the trauma from her past before letting her soak her jacket with tears. At the time, Yoshida had just finished getting the groceries with Mishima and was about to head back home when she stopped him and asked if she could stay over. When he said he could only let his girlfriend spend the night, she asked about Sayu, and he reminded her that she was just someone he wanted to help. She then asked about Goto, and he tried to avoid the question, but then she blew up in his face and said she knew he took her back to his place. He asked her how she knew, so she told him about seeing them leaving together, and said she had been following them ever since until she got to the spot near his place where where he found her. After apologizing for her serial killer behavior, she said she didn't like how he was always keeping things about Goto a secret from her, and he struggled to come up with a proper response. Back at his place, Sayu had just finished crying, so Goto asked if she had any questions, and she asked her if she actually loved Yoshida. Goto tried to tease her for asking about that, but Sayu said she wanted to know, because she could tell that he loved her. So Goto said she did and had apparently always wanted him ever since he first started working at the company. While they were planning to jumpstart Goto's love story with Yoshida, he was still with Mishima, who said she was asking all those weird questions earlier because she thought he had kicked Sayu to the curb to have some fun with Goto. After he said he could never say something like that to her, she asked if he actually loved Goto, and he said he was basically obsessed. So she asked him why he was letting Sayu get in the way of a good time with her. He then asked if she wanted him to kick Sayu out, and she said she just wanted to know what his priorities were before getting pissed at him again. She calmed herself down and told him he didn't really love Goto, because if he did, he would have no problem choosing between her and Sayu. She then asked if he was developing feelings for Sayu, and he said that wasn't the case. So she got up and told him he was too nice for his own sake. After realizing that she was overstepping, she apologized for saying too much and left. When he got back home, he found Goto putting some makeup on Sayu, and when they asked for his opinion, he suddenly forgot how to put a sentence together, so they told him to work on his rise game. Shortly after that, he was walking Goto home, and she told him to keep his sausage away from Sayu, so she wouldn't have to be the one to lock him up. When she asked if he could actually handle living with Sayu, he told her not to worry about it, but she told him to pay attention to her feelings, because she had sensed a weird attraction when they were all together at his place. He took what she said a bit too seriously, so she told him to chill out, and said she trusted that he only had Sayu's best interest at heart. At work some days later, Sayu was trying to remember who had the new name on the roster, when Yaguchi came in and turned out to be one of the otakus she clapped. He immediately recognized her and started reminding her of his head game. But she kept denying it all and thought her world was officially over. He was trying to ask her why her name wasn't Miyuki when Asami walked in and told him to get to the register. He tried to tell her about Sayu, but she interrupted, and luckily Asami was smart enough to know something was up, so she made Yaguchi leave and closed herself in with Sayu. She then told Sayu not to worry about explaining things if she didn't want to, and gave her a pat on the head while promising to always be there for her if she needed someone to talk to. On the way home that evening, Sayu ran into Yaguchi, who said he had been waiting for her and asked if she was staying in a new place. He already knew the answer to that and said she was brave for giving it up to random dudes. She ignored him and tried to leave, but he held her back and said he wanted to see Yoshida's place. She told him it wouldn't be possible because Yoshida wouldn't like that, but he kept persisting. So she straight up said no and started leaving. He then threatened to tell Asami and the store's manager about her past if she refused to take him, and she started shaking down to the bone. She asked if he only wanted to see Yoshida's place, and he promised to keep it PG, so she texted Yoshida to give him a heads up so he wouldn't worry about it. When they got there, Yaguchi took a quick look around before asking if she had let him in yet, so she told him about the arrangement she had with Yoshida, and he almost didn't believe her. He then went over to make her relive their time together, but she didn't want it and kept trying to push him back. He wouldn't budge, so she slapped him. That only got him pissed, so he got a lot more aggressive, and she started tearing up while thinking of all the things that could get messed up for Yoshida if Yaguchi decided to tell everyone the truth. To keep Yoshida safe, she stopped resisting and told him to make it quick, but then Yoshida barged in right on time to stop them. After making sure she was okay, he kicked Yaguchi out and started asking him what he was trying to do to Sayu. He made his intentions very clear and asked Yoshida why he was trying to be a hero when Sayu was basically offering him her plot for free. Hearing him talk about her like that started pissing him off, but he controlled himself, and Yaguchi asked if he was actually going to keep letting her stay. When he said she could stay as long as she needed, Yaguchi told him he would never be able to fully take care of her without going completely broke or landing in jail. After Yoshida said he was trying to be the one adult that knew how to control the sword, Yaguchi said he was tired of listening to him and turned to leave. Yoshida then told him to stay away from her, and Yaguchi said their little talk was all the deterrent he needed, so he promised to leave her alone and left. After thinking about everything Sayu had gone through and crying for her, he went back inside to check on her and listened as she told him she couldn't understand why she was scared despite the fact that she had done it with Yaguchi countless times. He gave her a hug and told her it was normal to feel scared, but she kept on crying, so he told her to stop treating herself like trash or letting her past become the one thing keeping her trapped. After another long hug, he promised to keep protecting her even if the rest of the world had a problem with it. At the store the next day, she zoned out while stocking up some snacks, so Asami asked if anything happened with Yaguchi, and she tried to hide it behind a smile. After Asami said she didn't like how Sayu always hid the truth, she went to ask Yaguchi about it, and he straight up told her he tried to smash and got rejected. Asami got pissed at him and asked if he did anything else, so he told her about how he tried to force her and almost got his teeth slapped out. She forced him to apologize, but then a customer showed up, so she went to attend to them, and he told Sayu he actually regretted trying to force her. After he apologized, she asked him why he didn't tell Asami the whole truth, and he reminded her of his promise not to snitch in exchange for seeing Yoshida's place. She laughed at his weird moral code and told him she was no longer upset about what happened, but still couldn't forgive him, and threatened to not be so easy if he ever tried it again. He then got up and said Yoshida was dumb for turning her into a proper woman without ever trying to smash, and left her feeling happier than she had felt in a while. On the way home with Asami later on, she got a text from Yoshida explaining that he would be spending the night at the office for work, so Asami took her phone and offered to watch Sayu, and he thanked her for it. Asami said it wouldn't be a problem for her since her parents were not home, but she wanted to grab something at her place first. And shortly after that, Sayu was staring at Asami's mansion in disbelief until she came out. When she asked about it on the way to Yoshida's place, Asami said her parents were extremely rich but also paid her very little attention because of their hectic lives. Sayu also decided to tell her the whole truth about the choices she made that led to her life with Yoshida, and they ended up spending the night stargazing while talking about their childhoods. After sharing her dream of becoming an author that almost got her disowned, Asami told her a story about the stars she learned from her dad before grabbing Sayu's hands and telling her not to beat herself up about the mistakes she made, because they had also helped her learn a lot about herself. Hearing that opened her tear gates, so Asami told her it was okay to fall apart every now and then, and also held back her tears to remind Sayu that she would always help her get back together. The next day, Yoshida got back early and said he finished up on time because he spent the night working. After telling her he already bought dinner, he started apologizing for not being with her just after what happened with Yaguchi, but she told him it was okay. She then thanked him for helping her learn to value herself and said she was actually starting to think about her future. So he gave her a pat on the head and promised to keep helping her find her way for as long as she needed. At the store much later, Asami told Sayu to check if Yoshida had responded to her request to come over again, and after seeing that he was cool with it, she decided to go stock up the shelves. Just then, a car pulled up by the store, and Asami told her the same car had been showing up recently, but no one ever came out. At Yoshida's place later on, Asami got tired of a problem she was trying to solve and told Sayu to take a look, but Sayu said it was basic stuff. Asami then came up with several reasons why she couldn't solve it to compensate for her 200 megabyte processing brain. Sayu tried to explain it to her, but she decided to take a break and said she had to somehow learn the entire course to secure her future as an author. That reminded Sayu of what she told Yoshida about her future, and she zoned out while thinking about it. When Asami asked if she was okay, Sayu said she was just trying to come up with ideas for dinner, so Asami decided to brainstorm with her and came up with the perfect idea. Moments later, in the office, Yoshida got a text, and while he was reading it, Mishima obsessively watched with jealousy swelling up inside her until Goto went to ask for his help while obviously flirting, which made things even worse for her. Immediately Goto left him. Mishima went to her desk and asked to have lunch together. Moments later, they were seated together, and Goto told Mishima to consider switching to a healthy diet to fix her lack of plot before asking if there was something she wanted to ask. Mishima wanted to know what Goto thought about Yoshida, and her overly serious expression made Goto almost choke on her salad. But she only said she had noticed Yoshida's recent appearance changes and said she had heard rumors of him having a girlfriend. Mishima then asked if she knew about Sayu, so Goto told her about the talk they both had at Yoshida's place. Mishima then asked if she was worried about Sayu stealing Yoshida away, and Goto said she wasn't bothered by it because she couldn't control Sayu's emotions. Mishima told her it was better to fight for what she wanted, but Goto said it was pointless to try and control people's feelings, especially when it came to love. Mishima blew up again and said she was being a scared weakling who couldn't go after what she wanted, so Goto first told her to chill out and said they had to wait and see how Yoshida felt about Sayu. Mishima asked her why she was acting uninterested since she loved Yoshida, so Goto said her love was the exact reason why she wasn't planning to do anything. After work that evening, Yoshida had just gotten a text from Sayu about dinner when Mishima showed up and asked to go see a movie together again. When she got upset with his uninterested body language, he showed her the text from Sayu, so Mishima suggested exchanging numbers instead. She said he had to give it to her since he already gave his number to Sayu and Goto, so he gave her his phone and told her there was no point in taking his number because he wasn't good at texting about anything besides work. Barely 2 sentences into response, she blew up in his face, saying he only ever liked to do whatever he wanted and tried to convince himself that he was helping others without even knowing how they felt. When he asked if she was talking about herself, she decided to stop hiding the truth and confessed her feelings for him. She then gave him back the phone and said it was okay if he didn't want to text her back, but he said he would, so she started off by asking if they could see a movie again later, and he accepted. After saying she liked how he always tried to do what he was told, like a good little boy, she left. At home later that night, he was having dinner with Sayu, who was excited to talk to him about Asami's exams and the quest they had gone on to make dinner, but he was zoned out thinking about what Mishima said. When she noticed and asked if he was okay, he changed the subject and told her to keep making dinner plans with Asami. That weekend, he saw that Sayu was going extra hard with the chores, so he offered to help with the feuding, but she pulled him back to bed and told him to stop trying to help. He told her he needed something to do and tried to get back up, so she tried to push him down again and ended up falling on his glizzy. Thankfully, he was still a clueless nutjob and only focused on the rag she dropped on his shoulder.
What?
So after she got up, he left to take a shower. He was still washing up when she found an old box and saw his graduation album in it. So she looked through and saw that he struggled with baldness in high school before also finding a pic of him with a girl. He found her staring at it and told her the girl was his girlfriend back then. But then she started teasing him, so he made her put the album back. He then told her about how he basically scared her off with his obsessive nature because she was the first older girl he had ever dated. Just as he was about to get to the balcony, she called him back to say something, but his face made her nervous, so she told him to stop smoking, and he started laughing while she stared at him with a weird look on her face. At work the next day, Asami had just swapped shifts with Yaguchi when he told her the creepy car was back. But this time, they actually pulled in. When the driver let Kazuto out, Sayu freaked out and ducked behind the counter, so Yaguchi asked if he was someone she didn't want to see before helping her get to the back. Kazuto met him at the counter and started asking questions about Sayu. Meanwhile, she was at the back telling Asami that he was her brother. Moments later, Yaguchi came in and told them Kazuto had left already, so Sayu thanked him for the help. He told them he had a thing against rich snobs like Kazuto, before telling Sayu that he was actually serious about finding her and saying her runaway life might be ending soon. On the way home after that, she got lost in thought until Yoshida texted to tell her he would be working late again. Later that evening, she had just finished shopping at the mall when Mishima touched her and almost gave her a heart attack. After Sayu explained that she was shopping for groceries, Mishima told her she was in the theater for a solo movie date. Just then, Sayu got behind her and asked for her help hiding from Kazuto, who was still outside trying to find her. Mishima promised to help her and waited until he wasn't looking before running off with her and getting to a karaoke place, where Sayu immediately started thanking her. She then tried to text Yoshida about it, but she hesitated and said she didn't know how to tell him about it without making him worried. Mishima offered to text him instead and showed it to her after she sent it to be sure it was okay. At the time, Yoshida had just finished his project for the day, and Hashimoto was trying to tease him about Sayu, but then he got the text and got confused. Not long after that, Mishima finished traumatizing Sayu with her voice and told her to pick a song, but she said karaoke sessions only looked good in movies. After sitting beside her, Mishima made sure she was okay and asked to be sure she wasn't running away for committing a crime. She then asked Sayu if she had started considering the fact that she would have to go back home, and Sayu said she was. But then Mishima asked why she was still grocery shopping, and Sayu told her she still wanted to hold up her end of the deal with Yoshida. Mishima told her it wouldn't matter to him if she skipped a day and suddenly started asking her about her feelings for him before saying that they had both become attached to each other, so Sayu would get that her next choices could really affect Yoshida. She then told her to start thinking hard about what she wanted to do, because she was running out of time to make a choice, and apologized for asking so many heavy questions. The next moment, Yoshida showed up and asked why they had to go to the farthest karaoke spot, so Mishima made it sound like they had just been walking around town together before finding the spot. After he asked Sayu if she was ready to go, he helped her with the bags and was talking to her about dinner while Mishima watched them and desperately wished she could swap places with Sayu. Yoshida asked if she wanted to go back with them, but she said she was okay, so Sayu thanked her before heading out, and Yoshida tried to handle the bill. She stopped him from paying and said he was doing the weird selfish thing she told him about, so he instead asked if she wanted to see a movie together sometime. After telling her to get home safe, he left, and she immediately dropped to the ground while crying about how he had never looked at her the way he looked at Sayu. On the way home with Yoshida, Sayu asked if there was anything he wanted to do with her just before they found a poster for the festival, so he offered to take her to it. The next night, he struggled to keep his demons in check while staring at her in a yukata, and decided to keep looking away while she told him about how she never went to a festival growing up. After getting there and realizing that he wasn't looking, she asked for his opinion on her outfit, and he actually managed to give her a good compliment. She then asked if it made her look better than Goto, but he didn't hear it and asked her to repeat it, and she told him to forget about it. Seeing some kids with cotton candy reminded her that she had also never tried it before, so he decided to take her to a stand for her first one. After getting it, she offered to feed him some of it as a way of thanking him, and he initially tried to avoid eating from her hand, but as always, he folded and ended up increasing her feelings for him. A kid suddenly bumped into her, so he took her hand to keep her from falling, and she told him to keep it that way so she wouldn't get lost. Moments later, they were watching the fireworks together, and he started smiling for some reason while taking glances at her. He then started thinking about what his life would have looked like without her, and by the time he was done imagining, he thought she was missing and started freaking out. She was right behind him and said she just wanted to throw something away, so she grabbed his hand again and asked if he was worried. After saying he was, they kept talking and watching the fireworks until he started asking if she was really going to leave him, and held his mouth shut to stop things from getting awkward between them. Moments later, the show had finished, so he tried to leave, but she stopped him and said she had given a different name to all the guys she had stayed with except him. She said he was the only one that instantly made her feel safe, and told him to explain why he asked if she was leaving. He realized that he might have taken things a bit far and gave her a pat on the head to reset the flow of their play date. She then asked if he would have still taken her in on that night and clapped her if she was an adult. But before he could say anything, she told him to forget it so they could get back home. The next morning, someone rang the bell and woke them both up, so he went to check, expecting it to be a delivery. But it was Kazuto, who left him shocked as he introduced himself and said he wanted to take Sayu home. He told her to pack up her things, but she refused and said she wasn't ready to leave yet. Kazuto started getting pissed and said her little stunt had sent him on a wild goose chase for the past couple of months because he was worried that she would end up running into someone bad. After she said Yoshida had always been good to her, Kazuto said adults like him like to hide their true intentions behind a false pretense. She suddenly blew up and told him to stop making Yoshida sound like a creep because he was nothing like the men Kazuto was talking about. Moments later, he called the office to tell them he would be taking the rest of the day off before telling Kazuto to go on with his questions. Kazuto then asked if they had done anything together, and they both said they were innocent, so he thanked Yoshida for taking her in and told her their mother was worried. Sayu immediately told him to stop the cab because she knew their mother had never been cared about her. Kazuto then explained that her teachers had been asking questions ever since she ran away, and their mother had been telling the school that she locked herself inside, but they recently started suspecting that their mom was the one keeping her locked away. Yoshida then asked if that was the only reason why she was looking for Sayu, and Kazuto basically confirmed what Sayu said about their mother not really giving a shit, but also said she was serious about bringing Sayu home. Yoshida then asked for some time and told him Sayu needed to think about everything before making a choice. Kazuto then asked to have a few minutes alone with Sayu and promised to not take her away, so they both agreed, and he went out to wait for her while Yoshida tried to tell her it was okay as she got changed. After giving him a hug, she went to talk to Kazuto in the car while Yoshida went to shave. Kazuto said he could see that Yoshida was a good guy and was thankful that she was okay, but then he reminded her of what happened to their mother before she left and said she had to go back because it had gotten worse. Sayu told him about how rough life on the run was but decided to leave out the major details before talking about how Yoshida put her on the right track. She assured him that she was planning to eventually go back home, but not until she was done figuring out what she wanted to do with her life while staying with Yoshida. Kazuto said he liked how she had finally started speaking her mind and promised to buy her a week by telling their mummy still hadn't found her, so she could think about it a bit more. Later on, Asami was at Yoshida's place telling Sayu how she would miss her, and Sayu said she wanted to tell them both about what happened before she ran off. She had always been on bad terms with her mom, and that had bad effects on her school life, causing her to spend most of it in isolation. That was until Yuko started talking to her and made her lonely life a bit more interesting. But after some time, the girls at school started bullying her. When she asked her about it, Yuko said it was because Sayu had rejected a basketball player that apparently had a lot of girls chasing after him. Sayu didn't understand why they were not bullying her instead, so Yuko said it was because Sayu was actually pretty while she was treated as the ugly queen of nerds that became friends with Sayu for clout. Hearing that, Sayu got upset and told Yuko she was her only friend, with tears pouring out. So Yuko told her to cheer up and thought the bullying would eventually stop. One day, Sayu saw some of the girls leaving the ladies' room while talking about Yuko, so she ran in and found her covered in toilet bowl water. She wanted to go after the girls, but Yuko stopped her and said it was okay. But Sayu grabbed her hands and decided to fight the bullies together, thinking that would solve everything. Not long after that, she went to the roof one day and saw Yuko standing on the edge. She tried getting her to climb back in, but Yuko started talking about how she was wrong for trying to become friends with Sayu Sayu because she was a nerd who didn't deserve to be around someone like her. After telling Sayu not to blame herself for anything, Yuko jumped off the edge and went back to heaven. Sayu immediately lost all strength in her legs, but still managed to crawl over it to see and almost went nuts. Days later, reporters kept trying to get an interview while she was holed up inside, and when she eventually went downstairs, her mom immediately started yelling at her for always making things complicated. When she asked if Sayu had actually caused Yuko's death, she got pissed and told her to shut her bitch ass up because she could never understand what it meant to care for anything but herself. That was when she decided to leave and ran into Kazuto on her way out, so she told him what happened, and he gave her a hug while also supporting her decision to get some distance. He took her to the station and gave her some money for a hotel on the condition that she would be safe and call if she needed anything. She took the next train out of town, but after weeks of gooning and being lonely, she ran through all the money and completely went numb, so she tossed her phone away to become a wanderer. After meeting the first upstanding citizen that seemed genuinely concerned for her safety, she started her new life paying daily rent with her box until she met Yoshida. After he thanked her for telling them about everything, Asami said she was really strong for surviving all that and gave her a hug while she let out all her trauma. That evening, she went to talk to Yoshida about his plans for Sayu on the balcony while she slept. Yoshida told her it was out of his hands since her family wanted to take her back, but Asami said he had to do something to help her out and told him to think of something before it got too late. The next day, he told Hashimoto and Mishima about it, and they said it was best for Sayu to get back to her parents, but they noticed his expression and asked if there was something else. He still had not told them about what really happened to her, so he just said her parents were toxic, and Hashimoto told him to leave it to her brother since he was on her side. That night, he got back home and met Kazuto, who was waiting to talk to him, so he kept his things before meeting him at the park. After Kazuto apologized for being rude the first time they met, he offered him a drink and sat to talk about the day he found Sayu sitting under the lamppost. Kazuto then told him that their father was a rich company owner, but because he couldn't keep his sausage under control, he found a new girl just as their mother got pregnant for Sayu. Their father told her not to give birth to Sayu, but she decided to keep her, thinking it would save their marriage. He still left after she was born, and their mother started seeing Sayu as a reminder of their dad's betrayal, which was why she treated her badly. After telling Yoshida that Sayu had never actually experienced having real care from an adult, he got up to thank him again for looking out for her. He then asked him to keep looking out for her so she could be sure of herself before going back to see their mother. He went back home shortly after that and told Sayu about the talk he had with Kazuto, and she told him Kazuto's support was what made her terrible childhood bearable. She then said she was still scared to go back, but would work on getting through her trauma, so she could finally get strong enough to face her mom again. The next night, she gave him a recipe book with all the meals she made for him, so he wouldn't go back to eating takeout. At work the days later, Hashimoto tried to grab lunch with him, but he passed up the offer and said he was okay with his endless supply of energy drinks. Hashimoto then told him to take a break to get his head straight, but he said he was okay. So Hashimoto left and Goto started noticing his sudden addiction to working excessively. At home that night, Sayu said she wanted to take him somewhere, and they both ended up at the stargazing spot Asami had shown her. After talking about the conversation she had with Asami that night, she told him that although she regretted giving it up for so many guys, she was glad that it caused her to meet him. She then grabbed his hand and said she wished she could stay with him forever, so she wouldn't have to deal with going back to her emotionally abusive mom. After saying she couldn't bear the thought of being separated from him, she revealed that she had spent most of the week trying to run away without telling him, but just couldn't get herself to pull it off. She got up to stop feeling the tension of being so close to him, and said she wanted to go back so she could prove that meeting him really changed the perspective she had on life. She got closer and pulled his hand to her heart while telling him to wish her luck, and they both ended up crying. The day before Sayu was supposed to go back home, Hashimoto could see that he was going to miss her and suggested getting off early to spend the rest of the day with her, but he said it wasn't necessary. Mishima then suggested following her back to Hokkaido, but he thought it was weird, so she reminded him that he had been doing weird shit ever since the day he first found her at the lamppost. He tried to use his work to escape having to go with her, but Hashimoto offered to cover for him. He then said Sayu needed to deal with her troubles on her own and would only get slowed down if he got involved. Mishima still tried to change his mind about it, but he felt better about hiding away from the pain he was feeling. Later on, Asami gave him a call to ask if he knew where Sayu had run off to, so he tried to call her but didn't get a response. After hearing that she was missing, Hashimoto told him to go look for her, but he still couldn't put on his big boy pants, so he got up and told Goto they were both sick. Goto gave them permission to leave, but Yoshida still wanted to hide behind his work, so Mishima offered to finish up for him. Moments later, Hashimoto was driving like he was auditioning for a Fast and Furious movie, while slowly getting pissed at Yoshida. He told Yoshida his weird behavior after taking Sayu in was expected, but had started getting out of hand because he was a couple of bills away from being broke and still paid more attention to a rich runaway with money issues. Yoshida barely even responded after listening to his dignity getting ripped apart, so Hashimoto told him to go to Hokkaido with Sayu since he clearly couldn't get his act together without talking to her or making sure she was okay. He stepped on the gas to speed up the search for her, and Yoshida finally collected enough words to ask about what would happen to the project they had going on if he left. Hashimoto told him to focus on fixing his issues first because he was already useless to the project with Sayu taking over his ability to function properly. After suddenly getting a call from Goto and Asami, they went to his place, and he immediately ran out to ask Sayu where she had run off to. Goto told him she had actually gone to the office to walk home with him one last time as a surprise and started teasing him for almost going nuts after hearing that she was missing. Sayu then apologized to them for causing so much trouble on her last day, but they were just glad she was okay, and Asami promised to see her off at the airport. That night, Yoshida was trying to finally get some sleep after stuffing himself with caffeine, but then Sayu suddenly asked if she could get in bed with him since they had one last night to spend together. He gave her permission but said he would kick her out if she tried anything funny, so she snuggled up behind him and tried to sleep. Moments later, he felt her erratic breathing and saw that she was nervous, so he turned over and said he would follow her to Hokkaido. She didn't believe him at first, but then he also promised to help her see her mom, so she hugged him and started thanking him. Early the next day, Asami gave her a goodbye hug that almost shattered her ribs before going to make sure Yoshida was going to keep his promise by threatening to turn his nuts to butter if he failed her. Whoa. She then wished Sayu good luck on the trip back, and several hours later, she was sleeping on the plane while Kazuto was asking Yoshida why he decided to follow her back. After Yoshida said he felt responsible for her and wanted to make sure she was safe with their mom, Kazuto told him their mom might not believe the story of him just being kind enough to let Sayu stay with him. Just then, she woke up and checked to see if Yoshida was still with her, and Kazuto started asking him if he wanted a parachute to jump off. After she started laughing, he reminded her of his promise to see it through together and watched as she started checking out the plane's seat. He was surprised to hear her say she had never been on a plane before, so he asked if she had also never been on a trip, and she said their parents were not into traveling. She then apologized for getting too excited, so he told her it was actually his first time flying business class, and they both ended up watching the clouds for the rest of the flight. After landing in Hokkaido, they got into the car, and Kazuto said he had to make a stop at one of his company's branch before taking her home. On the way there, he saw that Sayu was zoned out, thinking about what she had to face, so he told them to take a few hours to themselves first, and that immediately cheered her up. At a cafe moments later, they both talked about how they had never really been to one before. After looking through the menu and picking out what they wanted to order, he placed the order while she looked outside the window and saw two high school girls that reminded her of the relationship she had with Yuko. When he noticed and tried to talk about something else, she started telling him about how her mom brought her up to believe teenagers were always meant to stay indoors. It was after leaving that she realized that going out with friends was a normal thing, so she told him how happy she was to be on a playdate at a random cafe with him. He asked if she was scared about going home, and she said she was, but felt better knowing that he was going to be there with her. Later on, Kazuto picked them up and asked Sayu if she was ready to go home, but she wanted to go somewhere else first. Just after sundown, they were outside her high school, and Kazuto tried to stop her from going in, but she said it had to be done and asked Yoshida to follow her. She pulled him along and made him sneak into the compound with her from the back. After crawling through a torn fence, his adult reasoning started kicking in, so he told her trespassing was wrong, and she told him to stop talking about the rules when he had done way worse things. They walked through most of the hallways in the building until she suddenly stopped right beside a flight of stairs. After he checked and saw that they led to the roof, she grabbed his arm to get her courage back before climbing up with him until they got to the door. She tried to open it, but it was locked, so she decided to use the window instead and initially almost let her fears win, but she summoned enough strength to jump in. She immediately asked him for support and started shaking, so he also jumped in to hold her until she said she was okay again. After looking at a bench and remembering Yuko, Sayu realized that she was actually not okay, but still managed to put one foot in front of the other, while seeing flashes of Yuko until she dropped right by the bench. Yoshida tried to help, but she stopped him and said she was okay before running to grab the fence. She started blaming herself for what happened to Yuko, so he went to pull her away to say it wasn't her fault and saw that she had hurt herself with the fence. She refused to believe that it wasn't her fault, so he told her it would have never happened if Yuko didn't get bullied, but Sayu pulled her arm away from him and said she was the reason Yuko was bullied in the first place. Seeing that she was still holding herself responsible, Yoshida grabbed her and told her to stop blaming herself because she and Yuko both chose to care for each other. Sayu started crying even harder and said she felt betrayed by Yuko, but also hated herself for feeling that way. So he told her it was okay to feel betrayed. After telling her to forgive herself so she wouldn't have to carry around so much guilt, he pulled her in for a hug and told her to let it all out. So she dropped to her knees and started letting out all the pain she had been holding in since that day. Later on, Kazuto started wondering when they would get back while they were still on the roof talking until she got up and took one last look at the spot Yuko jumped from. They started heading back moments later, so he asked if she felt better, and she said the pain was still there, but she was going to accept it and use it to keep Yuko alive in her heart. They met up with Kazuto outside, and this time she was finally ready to go back home. But when they got there, she took a minute to pull herself together before going in with them. After Kazuto called their mom, she immediately walked up to Sayu and gave her a brutal slap that left her too stunned to speak. She started demanding to know where Sayu ran off to and said she had caused their family a lot of trouble. But before she could get close enough for another brain-resetting slap, Kazuto stopped her and introduced Yoshida. He told her how Yoshida watched after Sayu at his place, but Ogiwara didn't even want to hear about it and walked back inside. At the dinner table moments later, Ogiwara gave Sayu a long hard stare before telling her to explain what she planned to accomplish by running off on her little freedom mission. After Sayu said she wasn't even trying to understand, Ogiwara responded by saying Sayu never liked to talk to her in the first place. Sayu then asked Ogiwara if she remembered what she said to her on the day she left, but Ogiwara said she had already forgotten about that. After Sayu said that was all the proof she needed to know that her own mother didn't care about her, Ogiwara started asking if she had run off just to get attention. Sayu told her she ran away to get away from her toxic behavior before reminding her of how she accused her of being behind what happened to Yuko, with tears already pouring out. Ogiwara still said there was nothing to be accomplished by running away, and said it was a dumb move to end up at Yoshida's house before asking her why she even brought him back with her. After Sayu said he was there to support her, she told Yoshida to stay out of their family issues, and Kazuto tried to stop her from being rude, but she told him to stay out of it. She then asked if he had clapped her while they stayed together, and almost slapped Kazuto for interrupting again. But then Yoshida said he already knew what he did was illegal, but he still felt that it was the right thing to do. Ogiwara then asked Kazuto why he had brought Yoshida along before saying he was still technically a criminal. Just then, Sayu started banging on the table and told Ogiwara she hated her for always attacking anyone she considered to be a friend. After telling her about how Yoshida treated her and made her feel safe at his place, she said that was something Ogiwara was too toxic to ever pull off. Ogiwara got pissed and also started banging the table while yelling about how Sayu had made things hard for her by running away. When she suddenly said she regretted giving birth to her, Sayu started crying and Yoshida almost smashed his glass on Ogiwara's head, but he changed his mind and drank all the juice before telling Ogiwara to chill out. He took several minutes to carefully choose his words while they all watched until he told Ogiwara that Sayu didn't get to choose the person who would give birth to her. He then offered to take care of her if Ogiwara truly didn't want to be her mother, but then he took it back and said he knew it was not his place to take full responsibility over her. He told Ogiwara that she alone could take care of Sayu before getting up and going to beg her on his knees. Sayu tried to stop him while Ogiwara got confused watching before seeing that Kazuto also had the same idea. She suddenly started crying and kept yelling for the both of them to get out, so Kazuto told them to give her a minute, and they both went to sit outside. When Sayu realized that Yoshida was crying and asked if he was okay, he said he never thought her mother was that hateful. He then asked her why she didn't get pissed when Ogiwara said she regretted giving birth to her, but Sayu said it was okay, since he had gotten mad enough for the both of them. She then thanked him with tears in her eyes, and they both ended up crying until they ran out of their water in their bodies. Sayu then said she felt like she had been forgiven for all her mistakes while watching him beg Ogiwara, and he said he had actually said a lot of things he shouldn't have, which was why she probably got upset. She told him not to worry about her while grabbing his hand, and for the first time, he decided to lock fingers with her. So they both spent the next few moments stargazing until Kazuto came out. He told her Ogiwara had promised to stop bothering her if she would also stop trying to run away, and said Sayu had to stay home at least until after her graduation. Sayu knew better than to trust a promise from Ogiwara, but Kazuto told her things would be different, and said Yoshida's move to beg her had cracked into her ice-cold heart. After Kazuto thanked him for being able to do that for Sayu, Yoshida still thought he had done way too much, but Kazuto said even he had trouble getting Ogiwara to listen. But Yoshida had managed to cut deep within barely a few minutes of meeting her. After Kazuto told him to spend the night, Yoshida asked to speak with Ogiwara again. and Kazuto said it was cool, so he told Sayu to wish him luck before going back inside. He apologized to Adiwara for overstepping, but she said she was already over it and asked if he really didn't do anything to Sayu. After he assured her of his innocence, he tried to ask about Sayu, and she promised to have a talk with her before telling him to focus on going back to Tokyo. After leaving, he saw Sayu, who also wanted to talk to Adiwara, so he wished her luck before she went in to face her arch-nemesis. Ogiwara was expecting another lengthy argument, but then Sayu got on her knees and apologized for causing her so much trouble by running away. Ogiwara fought hard to hold back the tears while saying she wasn't going to apologize, because she didn't even realize when she became a tyrant to her own kids. She then said Yoshida's words about her being the only parent Sayu had really cut deep, and Sayu also started holding back the tears. Ogiwara then told her to focus on graduating before leaving, and moments later, Yoshida found her by the door, excited over finally having a regular conversation with her mom. Later that night, he got tucked in and was about to sleep off when he heard someone coming in right before Sayu got into his sheets. He scooted to the left to give her some space, but then she pressed her melons into his chest and said she was giving him a present since it was their last night together. She then told him that she liked how things turned out okay with her mom, but she still wanted to stay with him. He told her to focus on her relationship with Ogiwara and Kazuto instead. After he turned to face her, she asked if he finally wanted to clap her and reminded him that it was their last night together so that they could make it memorable, but he still turned her down and said he didn't need to clap her to remember the time they spent together. With tears in her eyes, she hugged him and thanked him for everything again before asking if he at least wanted to play with melons a little. He ended up watching her from a safe distance while she slept, and the next day at the airport, Kazuto told Sayu to take a walk so he could talk to Yoshida about something. After he gave Yoshida some cash for what he spent on the ticket back, Yoshida refused to accept it and told him to get some new clothes for Sayu with the money. When Kazuto suddenly asked if he was in love with Sayu, Yoshida explained his obsession with older women to make him understand why he didn't clap Sayu in the first place. Kazuto then said things with Sayu might have been a lot different if he didn't find her that night and proceeded to thank him again for everything he did for her. After wishing him luck back in Tokyo, Kazuto told him not to take too long with Sayu before heading back to the car. Yoshida met up with Sayu moments later, and she started asking about what Kazuto told him, but he was more curious about why she was still wearing her uniform. She told him it was a secret and wanted to keep talking, but his flight started boarding, so he said goodbye and turned to leave. She stopped him to say that she wore the uniform to remind herself of the day he found her, and said that was probably the happiest day of her life. After he said he was also happy to have met her, she decided to confess her love to him. He thought she was joking and gave her a chance to take it back, but she was dead serious, so he told her that he actually thought she looked good, but still wasn't into PDF activities. She then asked if he would reconsider in a few years, and he said he would, so she told him to wait until then. He said it would be impossible since he would have gotten even older, and gave her a pat on the head while telling her to focus on herself instead of thinking about him. She told him it would be impossible for her to stop thinking about him, and took his hand to say she would come find him even if he didn't wait for her. She started crying again, but this time he just laughed at her until she stopped and said the last goodbye before going to board the plane. When she got to the car park, Kazuto asked if she had taken her last moments with him seriously, but she said it definitely wasn't going to be the last time they would see each other. That evening, Yoshida got back to his place and found a note she had left him with one of her shirts so he could remember her scent. After looking at her recipe book again, he decided to try cooking without it, but when he tasted some of the soup, the horrible taste made him drop a tear before he fell and realized that he was a hot mess without Sayu. At the office 2 years later, Mishima gave him her latest project to look through, and Hashimoto said he still couldn't believe that she had gotten good enough to take the lead on her own. Yoshida said it was his teachings that increased her IQ level, and they all started laughing, but instead of blowing up in his face, she thanked him for his teachings and said she would keep asking for his help if she needed it. Just then, Goto asked if they were all free for an after-work hangout to celebrate Mishima, but Yoshida said he wouldn't be able to meet up. Goto decided to have it with just the two of them and said she would get him to join for the next one. Mishima then said he owed her a date before leaving, and Hashimoto started asking about his recent addiction to hanging out with Asami. On his way home that night, he gave her a call to know where she was, and she told him to come see her at the stargazing spot. But then he saw Sayu sitting under the lamppost, and his eyes lit up. He quickly cleaned off the tears and went to tell her to go back home, but she said it was too late for that, and asked to stay at his place. With Sayu finally getting to the point where they could hang out without people thinking he was a Japanese ditty, will Yoshida finally let his intrusive thoughts win? That is it for this video. Leave a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel for similar content. And as always, thanks for watching.